Oh, wow, there is a lot of people here. Bonjour, hello to the French speakers in the audience. My apologies, this presentation today will be in English. Je ne parle pas beaucoup de français, mais I'm still learning, and hopefully one day I can be back up here bilingue. Welcome to Building a 10-Foot Experience. If you haven't heard that term before, essentially it just means building an interface and a user experience for larger screens that are further away. So not phones, not tablets, not laptops or anything, but like televisions or things where you're sitting in a living room, you got a lot of distance between you and the screen. You could even apply it to things like billboard advertising, stuff like that. I'm doing this talk for two main reasons. One is because I'm a React developer, but React Native is still something that's new to me. So I wanted to build something from start to finish, and I hope that this could serve as kind of like a intro to, for everybody else who's also potentially wanting to take that journey, but also for people who are using React Native and want to try to go into the TV space. This might have a lot of information for you as well. The other reason is because I'm new to Montreal, and I've been in the tech scene in Toronto for a while, but I don't know anybody here. And so this is my opportunity to kind of more efficiently get my name to all of you people, and hopefully have an opportunity to talk to a lot of you after this as well. So without further ado, who am I? I'm that person. I'm Arvin. I'm an expat from Toronto, moved to Montreal in 2021 mid-pandemic, so yay, that was fun. I'm a full stack developer. Formerly, I was at Ecobee for a number of years, where I was a staff developer there, helping them build out, user interfaces, experiences, and backend services at scale. But now I'm freelance consulting because I realized that I want more time for myself and my family, and so I'm trying to work more in the not-for-profit and charitable spaces. I'm at Arvin Singla everywhere, and one thing I'll admit is I'm still mad that I could not get the domain name arv.in. But it is owned by another Arvin who's a developer in California, so at least I take solace in that. I am open for work for medium and small engagements, prioritizing not-for-profit and charitable organizations. So if you fall into that category and you think that I can help provide value for you, I'd love to talk. But without further ado, what is React Native tvOS? Well, it's React Native for tvOS, but what is more than just that is actually a fork of React Native, and it operates independently of the main React Native repository. And it's specifically designed for outputting to targets of Apple's tvOS as well as Android TV. And every release of React Native tvOS corresponds with integrating the changes made from React Native. So generally they're in lockstep, but there is some deviation, or rather a trickle-down effect where it sometimes takes time for the tvOS repository to incorporate the changes. But you do get all of the main benefits that are available in React Native, the relatively the same developer experience, support for Fabric, Hermes, TypeScript, etc. But the project has gone through a ton of changes over the last year and a bit. And as a result of that, finding correct and accurate information is actually kind of hard. Like, for instance, if you would expect that going to the main GitHub README would give you the information on how to get up and running right away, and it kind of does, but as of like a week ago, it does not anymore. And so I think patches welcome, like make documentation requests if necessary. That's probably what I should have done, but instead I made this presentation. So yeah, I'll be doing that. But things are a bit spotty and they're changing, and my hope is that this will act as a bit of a guide for anybody who wants to kind of get up and running with that. Okay, what's different about building for TVs, specifically with React Native tvOS? Well, I mean, the most obvious thing is just the interfaces. While the screens are bigger, you're looking at them from farther away. So your user interface elements generally have to be larger. And as a result of that, like, you can't necessarily show all the things on the screen that you want to be able to show. But more so than just how the interfaces look is how you interact with those elements. And so I like to think about it how we do in web accessibility, where when you're trying to do keyboard navigation, you really have to target your interfaces to be navigatable with 5 inputs: up, down, left, right, and enter. That's it. So like, you do have in more advanced remotes other types of gestures that you can do, but generally speaking, my philosophy on it is that we should be able to navigate an interface with just those 5 inputs. And if you can do that with pretty much anything in your app, then you can layer things on top of that afterwards. And so if you're familiar with React Native in general, you have things like scroll view. And scroll view on a mobile device makes sense for using a touch input from a finger to be able to scroll your input. But that doesn't work the same in a tvOS, in scroll view for tvOS, because all interactions are done through focusable elements. And focusable elements are things like input elements, buttons, all the list view types. But like just putting a block of text inside of a scroll view and then expecting the user to be able to press down and navigate all that text won't work. So there are, for instance, specific elements or components that you can use, like TV text scroll view, that would allow you to do that. But you don't just get that stuff for free. So there are some differences. And with the navigation stuff, you can see the animation kind of going there. This is an example of the TV focus guide view. And basically, when you're building out your element or your interfaces, a lot of tvOS or smart TV type interfaces are grid-based. We have horizontally scrolling grids, and then we have stacks of those on a page. And one of the big issues is, how do you manage focus between all of those elements? And that's something that this kind of the special sauce that the creators of this repository have created this component to help with. Because one of the big issues is if you take a look on the top right, number 3 there, and then at the bottom of it, below it, there's a category 5. If you just create a standard view and try to navigate from one element to the other, if they're not physically, or like if they're not rendered right above each other, they're actually not gonna scroll or focus from one to the other. So that's kind of the special sauce that the TV Focus Guide view does, is it allows you to have more smarter management, focus management across grids of different views. And so there's a really great blog post that was put out by the people who created that. That's where I got this animation from. It's kind of mentioned there, and I'll post it in the notes later. But highly recommend you take a look at that, because it really gives you a lot of interesting ideas of the different types of interfaces that you can create. So what did I build? I built a list view app, basically. So if anyone's familiar or not familiar with Overseer, let's just call it a home media management service that you can run. And basically they expose a really wonderful media discovery page that is available purely on the web. So you can open it in your browser, you can open it on a laptop or whatever, but they don't provide that interface on any other type of device. But what they do provide is a nice RESTful API. And so I took it upon myself. This is something that I wanted to be able to use to basically look and see what movies are coming up, what TV shows are there, what's on the different streaming platforms. And it was a good proof of concept for me to be able to actually create something. And so the makeup of the React Native app itself is pretty straightforward. I use React Query for management of the RESTful API. I use Zustand for state management, but you could essentially use whatever state management library you want or roll your own. And React Navigation to be able to navigate within the interface. And of course, the special sauce of this particular application is really the components, because I really wanted it to mirror the existing web interface that they created. And so I tried to mirror it as much as I could within the user interface. And with that, why don't we do a super quick app and code demo? These always go so well. Nope. Okay. That is not, yeah, that's good. All right, so what we have here is the app running within the tvOS simulator. And basically you can see that when we load up the application, we get a nice, beautiful interface that shows us all of our trending, popular, and these are all horizontal lists that scroll horizontally when you move across them, but then we can navigate down to go across different types of lists as well. And then navigating into a given element does a navigation event, which takes us to a different screen where we can load up the data that we pulled down, and then show similar movies, allows us to kind of navigate within that page. We also have access to trailers, so that kicks the user out to YouTube to view the trailer on YouTube. And if you've set up your Overseer instance correctly, you would also get a request button, which allows you to actually make requests to potentially do stuff with that content. And so that's kind of a very quick example of what the app does. But what I thought would be interesting is now this is the discovery page. Let's take a look at what that actually looks like in VS Code. So yeah, essentially it's a pretty stock React page. I'm doing some query fetching at the beginning with my use query hooks to fetch all the data from the different APIs. And I'm setting up a bunch of event handlers for navigation when user presses on various things. And then ultimately just doing rendering of the different list views. And if the keen-eyed among you will actually notice that I'm not using that specialized view or the specialized component that I was talking about before. I actually don't know why I'm not. I feel like I had that in a PR for myself that I never merged in. So I'm gonna have to change that at some point. But really, it's just rendering lists of content once you've fetched it from an API. So the overall development experience is similar to any React application that you would build. What you're really focusing on then is building out those custom components to allow you to display the content that you want on the screen. And so if we dive in a little bit, you can kind of see this is an individual one of those individual frames of a movie or television show. And what it does is it's actually like a touchable opacity element, and with different things for when an element is focused, when you blur, when you're pressing on it, and parallax properties, so that we can actually expand it and tilt it and do all of those things. So all of that stuff is pretty common to most React Native applications. So it really is very, very similar, other than just keeping in mind those navigation and focus cues that I was talking about before. Anyway, so let's go back. All right, so what is the current state of the developer experience for React Native tvOS? Well, y'all are lucky, because literally as of a week ago, I mean, that 3 days ago was a screenshot from a week ago, Expo is now the first choice for building projects in React Native tvOS. So the version of the application that I built is not using Expo. It's using the React CLI to instantiate a new project. But moving forward, you can use Expo and get a lot of the benefits that you get when building React Native apps in Expo, including many, but not all of the Expo components that are available to you. So one of the things that they provide is AV support, so you can play video, you can play audio, all of those things. There's a full list on the Expo documentation. If you search for Expo and tvOS, their guide gives you a full list of all the available components that you can use with Expo on tvOS. Going back to that whole documentation being kind of shady thing, they introduced Expo support, but they never kind of outlined how do you get the Expo Go app on your physical device. Sadly, it's not available in the App Store like it is for iOS and Android on mobile devices. So essentially what you have to do is do an initial build of your app, open up Xcode and actually push it to a physical device. And once it's on there, then you have the Expo Go client. So that's not something that you kind of get automatically or for free, and there's no documentation on it. So you're welcome. You do get, as far as the developer experience, hot module reloading. You get access to the debug menus, which are a little bit limited because you don't have, for instance, you do get reloading, you do get the performance monitor, but you won't get something like the element inspector, because you can bring it up, but there's no way of actually selecting an element that you'd like to inspect. So it's basically just they ported it, but they never actually made it work for the type of device that we're working on. There is, of course, support for third-party modules. So React Native Video, React Native Reanimated, React Navigation, which I used, their native component. All of these things do work for React Native tvOS, but you do need to be aware that because there are so many changes to core components under the hood, hence why it's a fork, your mileage may vary when it comes to like React Native modules that you might want to use for your project. So definitely check your documentation before just trying to get it running in your project. How much time do I have left? Oh, I really rushed through that, eh? So we can do another demo. I thought it'd be interesting to just quickly set up a brand new application from scratch, but I'm gonna have to put this here for a sec. Okay. Because live demos always go so well, so we're gonna see how this goes. So because it does take a while, essentially what I've done is I've used the Expo CLI to do this command, which is basically using the create Expo app to use the with TV router template. And the with TV router template basically just allows you to use Expo's directory-based routing. And it sets up a brand new application with demos in place for that. And so pretend I did that. And then essentially all we would have to do, if I actually close this simulator because I can't have that running. I can't have this running. So you're actually doing an npm run iOS, but what you can see is an environment variable called expo_tv. And that environment variable is essentially the flag for Expo that this is a TV-based project. And so everything in terms of its build process or whatnot is going to be based on running a TV application instead. And so this is the hello world example that you get when you do the install with the routing support. And so you can see you're navigating. If you actually go to the TV event demo, this one's pretty cool because it allows you to actually see as you start to touch things on your keyboard, left, right, up, down, enter key, and then you can actually like move into the different things, and you can see focus states and highlights and on the touchable opacities. So this gives you a really, really great starting point at being able to kind of see, okay, this is how I can interact and work with these different types of elements, as well as navigation between different areas of the application. But if we go just a little bit further, we can see we can see hot module reloading in action. And so that allows us to kind of work exactly like we would with any other React Native application. And once you do get that Expo Go client on your physical device, you can sit with that large TV in front of you and start developing against it too, sitting on your couch with your laptop, which is actually a really fun experience. Highly recommend everybody does that. Yeah, so that is kind of the basics of how you get it set up and going. And this is all, and though that command, as well as all of the information, is actually available on the Expo website. The Expo guide for tvOS should be where everyone goes for their base install and information on how to get started. Don't necessarily rely on the README on the React Native tvOS site itself. So some takeaways. If you're comfortable with React, it's super easy to play around and get set up with running React Native and for tvOS. I highly recommend that when building out navigations that you worry about making sure that the lowest common denominator, meaning those 5 inputs, up, down, left, right, and select, are how your primary navigation works, and then progressively enhance from there. Using Expo and the Expo docs are the approach for starting a new app on TV or for tvOS. As with all things, also be careful when you're upgrading or integrating new versions, because I have been bitten by that. As a lot of work has been done on this project, things break, you got to fix it. You have to dive deeper, and you're doing a lot of Stack Overflow and queries online. And like I said, because there's not a ton of support, there's not a lot of people answering questions either. So just be cognizant of that when you run into the issues, you might not be able to find the answers you're looking for. Currently, there are no libraries that provide more native-like components. So if we're talking about like Apple design guidelines for tvOS or Android's like interface design stuff, there's no actual component libraries available for creating that native-like experience. So if you want to do that, you're going to have to do it on your own. And it might be a great opportunity to create an open source project if anyone's looking for something to do, because that would be really awesome. And then, of course, submitting apps to their respective app stores is still a pain in the butt. And but I do have some really, really good news. Literally 2 hours ago, I got an email from Apple that this app has been approved in the App Store, and I can release it. So I'm really happy about that. So thank you very much. Yes, questions?
The presentation had mentioned that it targets Apple tvOS and Android TV, and I'm not familiar with the whole TV development stuff. Does it also support Roku and Amazon Fire Stick?
No. Well, so Amazon, any Amazon-based project, it does support because they are a flavor of Android TV. So I was actually able to do testing on a Fire Stick at home. But Roku, Tizen, which is Samsung's, or LG's WebOS, none of those are supported at this time. It's purely just Android and iOS, or tvOS, sorry. In the back?
Yeah, do you need to worry about TV resolution? 1080p or 4K TV?
Yeah, so Apple, the tvOS scaling works like kind of automagically, but Android TV scaling is the Wild West. And so what I had to do, and I could maybe show this at some point, is in the styling, I had to create functions to basically determine the screen size of the device and then make appropriate pixel calculations in that way. But for tvOS, it just works no matter what, whether it was 1080p or 4K, it all looked beautiful.
So you mentioned before, you cannot scroll into some text. You always have to focus on text.
Yeah.
So it's up to you to design your app so everything is visible. Because you have to navigate to if you have a very long text, you have to. You can't scroll it.
No, so you can if you use the correct components. There is a specific text scrolling, TV text scroll component, or I forget the exact name of it, that you can use, as well as, or you can also build it with touchable elements that might be hidden or just might be not visible, so that that will allow you to scroll in the interfaces as well. Oh, yeah.
Was there is any recommendation if you work with accessibility or you have any experience working with accessibility TVs or maybe that exists?
Sorry, are you accessibility or? Oh, yeah. My knowledge, my understanding is React Native does support like having accessibility tags, but I have not had the experience to work with that yet. I'm pretty sure that VoiceOver is supported and accessibility options are available for both platforms. So my assumption would be that any of those accessibility tags that are still part of React Native proper would carry over into React Native TV as well. And so, but I would have to validate that. Yeah, but that's definitely something that I should check out because I'm a huge web accessibility guy. So I should probably do the same for my app. Hi, yes.
In a similar vein, is your testing workflow? Is it you're developing on your computer? Are you using the arrow keys and enter, and then do most of your development, and then every so often you somehow deploy it to a TV, to the App Store or something, and then you're using a remote with that? Do you have like the option to have a remote for your computer?
So they have a virtual remote that you can bring up with the simulator, but for expedience, you can use your arrow keys and the enter key, and that's what I end up using because it is analogous. But you can actually bring up a virtual remote in the simulator, which then you have to awkwardly use your mouse to like click on, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. But then once you get it onto a physical device, you actually test it. So I did a lot of work in the simulator, and then eventually get it out. In Xcode, if you have a developer account, you can just send it to a device on the same network, or if you have a developer membership, you can put it out to test flight, and then you can actually like have other people download it as well. And that's what I ended up doing. I put out a call on Reddit in the Overseer subreddit for people to test it, and then I got all their email addresses, got the test to send that out. They tested it. I asked for feedback through like forums and whatnot, and so that's another way to work through the testing and getting people to kind of help you with that. Yes.
With the pros and cons of versus developing a similar type of applications in Swift, is there a substantial advantage?
I mean, for me, it's not, the advantage is not having to necessarily learn an entirely different suite of coding practices, and workflows and all that kind of stuff. I can continue to work in React, which I'm very familiar with and comfortable with. But also, I mean, one of the benefits that's somewhat lost in this is building out to other targets. So for instance, like if you're building in React Native proper, you can target physical devices, but you can also target the web. So you can target desktops. So you can write once and kind of build everywhere. But in this case, at the very least, I can build out to 2 targets. So I don't have to learn both Kotlin for building an app for Google's TV, and I don't have to learn Swift. So I can build it once in JavaScript, and then it'll run on both platforms. So that's my biggest benefit is the diversity of being able to publish on multiple platforms. Yeah.
Last question.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Sadly, I'm a Windows/Linux user, so I don't have access to Xcode for my apps. But as part of my workflow, I use EAS. So I was wondering if EAS could pre-build the apps and be able to transfer them to Apple TV or Android.
So I on the Expo documentation, they do have a section on EAS, and my understanding is that it does work and it is supported. So, but I haven't tried it myself. But also, if you are on Windows or Linux, you could also just work for Android TV and use an Android simulator as well, and that might give you an opportunity to at least just have it running on your machine natively as well. But my understanding is EAS is supported.
That was the last question.
Thank you, everyone.